In the last budget, $400,000 in seed funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It was struck down. I think it was a political decision, and we just got a new set of regulations that I think are going to be really great, and I was happy to support them, although I do think we still need seed funding. So we just passed yesterday a proposal that was advanced by David Mann to take our CRA abatement and take a portion of it, and half of the abatement that we're going to ask back from developers will go to neighborhood development, and half will go to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. What we haven't figured out and what I'm advancing is, one, what does this Affordable Housing Trust Fund look like? I tried to advance the question. We were told, no, let's not talk about that right now. We're just going to talk about this CRA thing. Wanting to make sure that we have extreme public comment and public response to how is this money going to be managed, who is it going to benefit, who gets to make the decisions about it. And then we know that this one source that we just passed is not going to be enough. We won't see $1 from it for probably 4 or 5 years. So how can we, and we know that we're going to be chasing that 40,000 unit number as that happens. So how do we make sure that we've got other sources? And so by standing up the Affordable Housing Trust Fund now, knowing that that source is going to come online in 4 or 5 years, we can begin to identify sources that can go into that fund now. Columbus was, I hate to continue to talk about Columbus. They're just like doing these things, and I'm like, we need to be like, why aren't we more aggressive? But Columbus started their Affordable Housing Trust Fund back in the early 2000s. They've invested hundreds of millions of dollars. They've seen an increase of 9,000 units of affordable housing in Columbus, but they have lots of sources. It's not just one source. So what we want to look at is, can we stand up the Affordable Housing Trust function now? Can we look for sources now that will go into the fund, and then when the VTIC, what we passed yesterday, comes online in 4 to 5 years, we have a supplement. But what I would be saying if I were you, which is very, very important as community advocates, is this entire process needs to happen in public. It has to happen in public, and we have to have public weigh-in and buy-in. Our city solicitor yesterday was starting to formulate a process whereby this might be developer-led. So a developer comes to the community with a proposal, and then the community gets the chance to weigh in on the proposal and accept or reject. We know what happens, right? The developer comes, big shiny project, either you take it or you don't get a project, as opposed to the community saying, here's what we want to see. Can we engage developers that we think will do the work the way that we want it? Can we set standards up front about what we want to see? Can we say we want to make sure that we've got a 50% AMI and 80% AMI, average median income, to make sure that we're representing the people at the bottom too? Because one of the things we're starting to see trend in the affordable housing space is that it's easier for some of our developers to say, we're doing affordable, but it's 80% AMI. Right? And we need that workforce housing too, for sure. But then they leave out the people who are at the bottom, so we still have a critical miss. Because we know that a lot of the people who are occupying our shelters, the people who are couch surfing, something I've experienced in my own life, these are the folks who are at the bottom. How do we make sure we have housing for them too? And unfortunately, the developer-led conversation still is very much often motivated by money. You make more money at the 80% AMI, and maybe don't have this isms and the isms that people are concerned about, which I think are all false for sure, then you have it to 50%. So the short answer is yes. Was the first to get out front on it, was rejected, and now it looks like we got at least a working model, and I'm pushing to make sure that we get that done, and we get that done with community input and community feedback, and we get that done quickly. You want me to just take them? Okay. You're the moderator, so I don't want to moderate for you.
You good.
Go ahead, man.
No,
Plus, every good public servant knows you don't want to pick between two people. I love you, bud.
Just to piggyback on the question that he asked you, you made an excellent point when you distinguished between affordable and low-income housing. And I'm in that low-income affordable housing development category. However, the problem that we have in Cincinnati is that the CDCs who actually does the low-income development are having a hard time getting financing and so forth. And that's being done deliberately. What if you, when you become mayor, What is your intent to prevent that from happening and the gentrification that comes with it?
So we have a motion that we had prepared for the meeting yesterday when the V ticket came forward, and we were asked by the maker of the motion, Vice Mayor Mann, to hold our motion because they didn't want to confuse and talk about the structure of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund while we're also doing the money piece, which I respected that because we wanted to get it passed. But part of what our regulations come from the Affordable Housing Advocates Group that's been meeting for the better part of a year on this. And one of the regulations says at least 50% of the funds have to go to 50% AMI or lower. Right? That way we know that at least half of the money will go to the place where we need it most, and we won't be flooded with a bunch of proposals that are only workforce oriented. So that's one way. So we build that into the structure and we say, here's what we're providing. We also will likely provide a combination of grants and loan funding, right? So we want to make sure that we are helping facilitate the housing that we need, and we would want to differentiate between the cases that we would use grant funding and the places that we would use loan funding, depending on the type of development and the ability for the developer to have a break-even point. Because we know that some of these projects don't get off the ground because they don't have the ability. We also have a huge structural change to public housing that is coming down right now, and I don't know if you guys have been following the conversation that's happening with HUD, where we're getting away from traditional public housing and everything will be financed affordable housing now. And that's a challenge and an opportunity. We're keeping close eye on it. It's a real sticking point, because what it's saying is we're no longer gonna have a public housing like what you see where by right, HUD helps construct and funds this housing. All of it will convert over time to this financing model. So you got to have a developer. That developer has to have a plan that makes it work, and it has to be financed by private dollars. That could be problematic because, as you know, the gap filling on 50% or lower is much harder than 80% and higher. So we're keeping an eye on it. I've been in some meetings already. We're talking with CMHA about this. We probably will, once elected, just calling on them every 5 minutes. Once elected, we will go up to DC immediately and meet with HUD directly and talk about our city specifically. Here's what our constraints are, because what we know is that every year we get requests for low-income housing tax credits. So they expect a lot of this will be funded by tax credits. And there's way more good projects than we have in tax credits. Right? Because everybody wants the sexy tax credit projects, right? So the low income housing tax credit projects are really small. And there are some that have to come back time and time again before they get approved because there's so much competition across the country. So I'm worried that we're going to hit a pinch point where we're going to have a need and we're not going to be able to fill that need because there's not enough money in the private market to be able to fill the gap. Another reason why an affordable housing trust fund is important. Sorry, I told you I can get real wonky if you let me. What's that MBA law degree working? Sorry, try to be more general. Any other questions? I know you all have questions. Yes.
Yeah. Last week I attended the forum that you had about the historic preservation, and I didn't.
That one was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. And then you didn't stay to hear the 16 candidates, which was very impressive.
Good.
That's a really hard.
No mayor can make it without a great council, so I hope you guys engage this group so we get a really good group of folks to work with.
But you had stated, or both of you had stated, that one of the solutions to saving some of our beautiful architecture would be to designate historic preservation districts. Well, you are now one half of a block from an historic preservation district where two large buildings that were taken out, where 2 homes were demolished, and it turns out we show up at the historic preservation public meeting and all the lines were redrawn before the public had a chance to even discuss it. So it's very discouraging. So designating historic districts means absolutely nothing.
It's just one part of it, right? So at that meeting, I also talked about making sure that we have people on the Historic Preservation Board that actually understand and respect historic preservation. One of the appointments that John Cranley made to the board was an individual who makes his living tearing buildings down.
Yeah.
You probably don't want to appoint someone to the Historic Preservation Board who makes his living tearing historic buildings down. That doesn't mean you don't want a mixed perspective. You know, not everybody's going to be somebody who would jump in front of a you know, a bulldozer, for sure. We want to protect housing that can be preserved, for sure. We want to protect it early, but that doesn't mean every building can and should be saved, right? There are certain safety risks and other things. One, by getting ahead of this and making sure that we're protecting buildings before a developer comes and wants it. So we want to make sure that it's not developer-led, because often we're chasing that, and it's sometimes who filed the permit first, right?
That's what.
But it's also making sure that we have the individuals who make the decision are people who respect what the rules say and who understand the value of historic preservation. I said at that debate that the thing that is most distinctive about Cincinnati, if you go outside, we have an issue with our distinctiveness. People don't know why we're special. But one thing that people know we're special for is our historic preservation. And so if we continue to tear these buildings down, we're not going to have. We also need to make sure that the historic tax credits are protected. And we have a trigger to be able to add additional years to that preservation, that tax credit, if we feel there is a need to make the project go forward. And we don't use that enough. I think we need to use that in those places where we're going to save buildings. So yes, I don't think it's the only solution. It is a solution, but we also have to make sure these other pieces are working in the partnership. And if you have a mayor who truly values historic preservation, I've been the lone vote on at least 2 of these.
Do you know what the status of the Dennison is right now? I mean, I know all construction has stopped, or demolition has stopped, but...
We've been told, and I gotta tell you, I don't get as much information as I like from the administration these days, so I can understand what the public knows even less than me. But we've been told that they're trying to find out whether or not the building that's next to them, whether tearing the building down completely will affect the integrity of the building that's next to it. And I think there's a determination being made on that. My fear is that when they did the original evaluation, that was never considered a question, and that we might get a last minute, hey, in order to get this building down, we got to tear the other one down, which, as you know, is a trick that we might see come, and we're keeping a watchful eye. It's gotten so bad that I now have the HCB send me their agenda, and I want all demolitions highlighted, because we've had more demolitions requests in the last 4 years than I believe we had in the 8 years before combined. And that's just not